Hey, I'm Eric from Curbside Cycle, and today we're going to talk about the economics of city cycling. So, when we're talking about the economics of city cycling, it's really good to put a number on things. But really, what we want to talk about right now is space and distance and the sort of geography of urban distances. So, there's been some big changes in North America since the 70s, and everybody moving to the suburbs and owning big cars and commuting all the time. And what we've seen is more and more people moving downtown. And we especially saw this after the 2008 recession. After the recession, marketers became aware of groups like millennials who weren't getting driver's licenses anymore and were choosing to live downtown in smaller spaces and valuing quality of life over, say, owning lots and lots of things. And indeed, that kind of trend is becoming more commonplace across North America. And perhaps one of the biggest sort of measuring sticks of this is real estate. So if you looked at, say, 1970s real estate, bigger spaces further outside of the city would have higher values. But today, if you look at real estate, one of the biggest metrics of a building's worth is its so-called walk score. Now, a walk score is basically a measurement of proximity. So it basically places a higher value on a place that has more access to groceries, daycare drop-off, schools, and that's within a distance that's viewed as walkable. So now let's say you've got a house or condo or apartment somewhere in a place that's got a really, really high walk score. Well, what does that mean for you? Well, almost immediately you're challenged with transportation. How are you going to get from place to place? A car doesn't seem to make sense anymore because most distances feel too close to drive. And of course, there's parking. There's no real actual point-to-point access. Walking, despite these high walk scores, feels a little too far. So what do you do? And of course, if you go to Holland, the answer is a bicycle. So you might think of Holland as a cycling utopia, thousands of people cycling, and there's no way that a North American city has anything in common with a place like Amsterdam, but that's not true. If you live, work, and play within a certain radius that's got, say, like a high walk score, the metrics are really, really the same. And that's that they all tend to ride distances no more than 7.5 kilometers. And this 7.5 kilometers is a really important number. That number is used for all sorts of other metrics that are happening across North America right now. So for instance, when FedEx was looking at cargo bikes and talking about last mile delivery, well, what is the last mile? It's certainly not just 1 mile. It's usually around 7.5 kilometers. And when city bike programs are launched where you have these bike shares, also the same idea is that the person who's using this is using this for a short burst activity, maybe going to work, and usually that distance doesn't exceed 7.5 kilometers. So in Holland, transportation experts will look at different measurable distances to determine who's using what kind of transportation in what kind of distances. So you'll have one block of like 0 to 7.5 kilometers, another block is 7.5 to 15 kilometers, and then two other blocks that follow that are basically greater. So if you go to Holland and you see all these cyclists, they tend to be riding under 7.5 kilometers. And in fact, 35% of people that are doing trips in Holland under 7.5 kilometers are using a bicycle. And that's who you're seeing there. What's interesting is that distances over 7.5 kilometers, usually 7.5 to 15, only 15% of people are riding bicycles now. So that starts to change, and it tells you something. A bicycle is good within a very particular range. So if you live, work, and play downtown, chances are really, really good that a bicycle could handle up to 90% of all your transportation needs. And if you compare that to a car now or transit, yeah, a bicycle is looking like a really, really effective option, a healthier option, and for sure a cheaper option. What's also interesting about Holland is that they have some of the highest car ownership in Europe, which is nuts because it also has some of the highest gas prices in Europe. So like, what's going on here? Why is this high bicycle ownership also coupled with high car ownership? How is this sort of all worked out? How does it make sense? Well, what's interesting about the Dutch is that they're not essentialists when it comes to transportation. It's not like you're just a cyclist or just a automobile user. That doesn't make any sense. You use a car for some distances, you use a bike for others. It's just common sense. So the reason why some have speculated that the Dutch own so many cars is because the bicycle, which is used for, again, up to 90% of their daily transportation needs, saves them so much money that they can own a car as a luxury item. And that's kind of the right way to look at things. Most luxury items that you own, say a fancy dress, a really beautiful suit, you only pull it out like maybe once a year, but it costs you a lot of money. And just like taking a vacation, you've got that car for when you need it for distances that are, say, greater than 7.5, 15 kilometers or beyond. Now, the e-bike has actually added a whole new variable to this economics of city cycling because e-bikes can really push the distances past 7.5 kilometers. So for instance, in Holland, 23% of people are driving a car in distances under 7.5 kilometers. But the minute you get to 7.5 kilometers to 15 kilometers, it increases to 50%. Now, transportation studies show that an e-bike is actually faster in urban gridlock than a car in distances up to 20 kilometers. So that makes it really, really compelling as a car alternative. And in fact, in Holland right now, you're starting to see the e-bike really push against the car in that bracket, the 7.5 to 15 kilometers. And that's a huge, huge plus for anybody who, say, lives just a little bit outside of the city center. They're starting to approach the suburbs now. So suddenly now, instead of being stuck in this gridlock that's going downtown every single day, you're on a bike path, a bike lane, or a quieter road, zipping downtown, sweat-free, wearing the same thing you're going to wear all day at work, feeling amazing. Of course, we also need to add to this one more factor, whether you do live most of your life within 7.5 kilometers, or whether you are stretching distances to 15 or greater, what if you need trunk space? And there, the cargo bike also produces a really compelling argument when looking at the economics of city cycling. Most people that would say bike back and forth to work will do so, but then suddenly if you've got kids thrown into the mix, or say you're a contractor and you've got tools, then you start driving a car instead. But a cargo bike just presents a completely different alternative. Suddenly you've got this truly amazing vehicle that can store up to 200 kilograms of weight, lots and lots of volume, super, super safe for your kids. Basically, a bicycle with trunk space for the last mile. Now, this whole economics of city cycling really ties in some ways to just psychology and how we as North Americans feel about bicycles. In Holland, bicycles are viewed as transportation, which is why they look a lot different from your sort of average North American mountain bike or hybrid bike or racing bike. Indeed, they're designed to be transportation, and they take themselves quite seriously. Now, if you've grown up in the suburbs and you have this sort of concept of cycling as just this thing you do once or twice a year, or maybe it's for people who are kind of crazy and put on lots of spandex and log tons and tons of miles, yeah, cool. We get that. You would think that. We find a lot of customers will walk into the store and look at these bicycles and say, oh my goodness, it's a lot of money. But again, if these bikes are meant to multitask up to 90% of your daily transportation needs, compared to the transit or driving, you are on the side of the angels 100%. It's just making sure you get the right bike though. And that's what we're trying to push at Curbside. It's just a little bit more of Dutch wisdom when it comes to the bicycle. This isn't just a toy, it's transportation. And it's transportation that not only offers you great health benefits, but it gets you there faster and much more joyously. So there is a pretty big difference between a North American bike and a European bike designed for transportation. And indeed, we are seeing more and more North American companies make city bikes that really mimic the European city bike. And what a city bike has that's fundamentally different from a hybrid bike is an upright position so that you've got a heads-up view, and that's just going to make you safer. But the big difference is mechanical, and you don't need to know a lot of technical stuff about bikes to buy a bike, but this one's really important. Most bikes that are sold in North America have minimum, 10 speeds, sometimes 30 speeds, sometimes even more. And you might ask why on earth you would need that when you're basically just riding from stoplight to stoplight in a radius, say, under 7.5 kilometers. And that's a great question, because you don't. Most city bikes use an internal gear hub. So instead of having this derailleur system where everything's totally exposed to the elements and is also quite fragile and very persnickety when it comes to tune-ups, the internal gear hub holds a tune for a lot longer, is sealed, and gives you all the gears you need. Basically 3, 7, and in some cases 14. So an internal gear hub just basically gives you the gears you need. It really cuts down your maintenance costs, and it's definitely an essential thing to look for when you're buying a city bike. Of course, there's some other things about city bikes that make them great. They have a chain cover, so you can actually wear what you're wearing right now to work. That makes sense. If you're riding under 7.5 kilometers to work, you don't want to be one of these people who has to get into an outfit as you're going out the door and then change an outfit when you get to work. That just seems like a really big hassle. And they'll come with everything on it already. So you'll have your rack, your fenders, your kickstand. That's a city bike in some. So we've talked a little bit about the why of city cycling and the economics tied to it, really tied to radius and the sort of use case of most people who live, work, and play downtown. But there's just simple cost benefits as well. So the initial cost of a bicycle and the accessories that you need is pretty low when you're comparing it to other modes of transportation. So a good city bike will cost around $1,000, and that might seem like a lot, but if you compare that to most transit passes, they're over $1,000. Though accessories that you need, it's not much. You just really need good security. A lot of city bikes already come with lights, which are always required by law, but lights are pretty cheap. And of course, there's maintenance costs, and we have talked about how city bikes are much lower in maintenance than your standard sort of 21-speed hybrid bike, but you still need to bring it in for a tune-up every single year just for preventative maintenance, and that's like maybe $80, $150. All in all, much, much cheaper than taking the transit. So upon looking at most Canadian transit costs for city bus, subway, that kind of thing, we found out it's actually quite expensive. Some transit costs are $80 a month, but that still works out to $960 a year, which is approaching the price of a city bike. Other cities are up to $160 a month, which works out to $1,920 a year. So if taking transit's expensive, we probably shouldn't even talk about driving a car, because driving a car in the city is extremely expensive, if not absolutely crazy, and stressful, like really stressful. Have you ever seen a happy driver in Toronto gridlock? Buying a car, yeah, maybe $3,000, maybe $30,000, maybe more, but it's still stuck in gridlock, no matter how fast it is, no matter how expensive it is. Gas, insurance, through the roof. Why are you doing this? Insurance can be as high as $172 a month, up around $2,000 a year, which is absurd given the fact that you just throw that money away. You could buy a city bike and that's going to last you 10, 20, 30, maybe even the rest of your life. The other problem with driving, of course, is it's never point to point. You never drive to the front door of the place you're going. You always have to find a parking lot. And of course, that parking lot charges you money, often a lot. And then you have to walk to your destination, what some transportation specialists call the last steps. So we've got the last mile and the last steps. And a car is not doing either well at all. And finally, of course, there's walking. And yeah, biking does compete with walking for cost. Walking is pretty free. So if you're a walker and you tend to walk distances up to 7.5 kilometers, but most of us find that those kind of distances are far too far to walk, and that's where a bike really fits in. Now let's talk about time benefits. So walking's cool, but cycling's a lot faster. And in fact, the numbers show that cycling is 3 times faster than walking. So you're just a lot more efficient on a bike than you are on your feet. As for driving, you're not nearly as fast as you think you are. Most studies show that driving in urban gridlock is no faster than about 16.6 kilometers per hour, which is dreadfully slow, especially if you compare it to a city bike, which can easily go 20 kilometers per hour, or an e-bike, which can range out at 32 kilometers per hour as per most Canadian and US law. And of course, if you're an e-bike or a city bike in a bike lane, you're just zipping by all those cars that are just stuck. As for transit, it's just never all that fast. It's very rare that, for instance, you would take just one subway to your destination. You often have to transfer. That transfer can take a lot of time. We also find that across North America, transit systems don't get the investment they need. So you're starting to see more and more cuts, more and more decrepit systems, more breakdowns, more delays. And as that's happening, strangely, the cost is going up. So that brings us back to cycling. It's faster than driving. It's certainly faster than public transportation. You can plan a direct route to your destination. It's door to door. There's no parking fees. You can usually lock up to a bike pole, to a fence. Finding parking is usually really, really easy. So cycling has really good time benefits, really good cost benefits. It also, of course, has really great health benefits. So if you're sitting in transit or you're sitting in a car, your body's not doing anything. In fact, you're probably feeling pretty stressed out. It's not great for blood pressure, not great for your physical fitness, and definitely not good for your mental health. But on a bike, everything changes. First, cycling is terrific for cardiovascular health. And if you just bike to work, you're actually reducing the chance of cancer or heart disease by 50%. It's a low-impact way to stay active, so it's great for older adults. And for you insomniacs out there, it improves sleep. But besides all of that, it's just mental health. It just makes you feel good. Living in a bustling city, it's tense, it's loud. But when you're on your bike, you're on your own little world, you're heading off to work, it can be the best part of your day. So in conclusion, it not only makes more sense to ride a bicycle in the city in terms of just like getting there faster and getting there healthier, it also actually saves you a lot of money. And we think the reason why a lot of people are maybe resistant to buying a bicycle and using it is things like safety, but that's really starting to change now. There's tons and tons of bike lanes being paved, and there's certainly strength in numbers. A lot of people are riding now. There's a lot of demographics. It's just not that whole racing crowd anymore. But it begins in some ways just with sort of rethinking the bicycle. We've all been sort of trained that when we turn 16, we buy a car, and when we have a child, we buy a minivan. But living downtown challenges that because it doesn't really work. and suddenly a bicycle enters the picture. And I know it sounds European, and it sounds like maybe it belongs there, but again, the metrics that are true in Europe are also true here. If you live, work, and play downtown, the chances are really good that your distances are more bikeable than they are drivable, or for that matter, walkable. If you like this video, hit that like button and definitely subscribe for more videos. We've got videos on folding bikes, e-bikes, cargo bikes, all kinds of bikes. If you have any questions, give us a holler. You can call us, you can email us. We also do sales appointments by video or by phone. And of course, if you're in Toronto, make sure you drop by.